The American legal system is built on checks and balances. Power is distributed among different branches. Each branch restrains the others. This ensures no single entity becomes too dominant. The judiciary's independence is fundamental. Judges interpret the law and enforce court orders. A judge's contempt ruling is significant. It cannot be undone by another judge. This principle underscores the gravity of court orders. The Supreme Court upholds this principle. Overturning contempt rulings would create chaos. It would embolden parties to disregard court orders. This principle is not abstract. It is played out in high-stakes cases. Recent events, especially during the Trump administration, highlight this principle. In March 2025, the Trump administration faced backlash. They deported 238 Venezuelan and 23 Salvadoran individuals to El Salvador. These individuals were alleged gang members. This happened despite a restraining order by Judge James Boasberg. He found probable cause for criminal contempt. The administration appealed, labeling the deportees as terrorists. They cited the 1798 Alien Enemies Act. This act allows deportation during wartime. The administration's defiance raised concerns about judicial respect. Consequences could include fines, jail time, or a presidential pardon. Note, a pardon applies only to criminal contempt, not civil. The Trump administration's defiance of court orders wasn't an isolated incident. The case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia provides another stark example. Garcia, a Salvadoran national, was mistakenly deported to El Salvador in a clear violation of a 2019 court order that barred his removal. Judge Paula Zinnes, presiding over Garcia's case, took swift action. She ordered officials from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the State Department, and the Department of Homeland Security to produce evidence and submit to depositions. Judge Zinnes made it clear that she was seriously considering holding the government in contempt. The case eventually reached the Supreme Court, which partially affirmed Judge Zinnes's order. The court declared Garcia's removal illegal. It ordered the government to facilitate his return to the United States. This ruling underscored the Supreme Court's commitment to upholding the sanctity of court orders. The administration, while claiming compliance, continued to dispute Garcia's innocence. They alleged that he was affiliated with a criminal gang. The administration maintained that Garcia's return would only be facilitated if he presented himself at a U.S. port of entry. This stance further fueled tensions between the executive and judicial branches. The Trump administration's clashes with the judiciary were not unprecedented. Throughout American history, there have been numerous instances of tension between the executive and judicial branches. Presidents, from Abraham Lincoln to Franklin D. Roosevelt, Richard Nixon, and George W. Bush, have challenged court rulings and asserted their authority. Perhaps the most well-known example is President Lincoln's suspension of habeas corpus during the Civil War. This action, while controversial, was deemed necessary by Lincoln to preserve the Union. Similarly, President Roosevelt's attempt to pack the Supreme Court during the New Deal era demonstrated his frustration with the court's opposition to his policies. President Nixon's refusal to hand over the Watergate tapes and President Bush's authorization of warrantless wiretapping after the 9/11 attacks further illustrate the potential for conflict between the branches. In each of these cases, the Supreme Court played a crucial role in defining the limits of presidential power. These historical examples underscore the importance of a strong and independent judiciary. They also highlight the ongoing tension inherent in a system of government designed to prevent any one branch from becoming too dominant. Section 5. The power of contempt upholding the rule of law. Contempt of court is a powerful tool at the judiciary's disposal. It is used to enforce compliance with court orders and maintain the integrity of the judicial process. When a judge issues a contempt ruling, it is not a decision taken lightly. It reflects a serious breach of legal obligations and a threat to the rule of law. The principle that one judge cannot overturn another's contempt ruling is fundamental to the concept of judicial independence. This principle ensures that court orders are not rendered meaningless. It prevents parties from shopping for a more favorable judge after receiving an unfavorable ruling. If judges could easily overturn each other's contempt rulings, it would create chaos within the legal system. Parties would be less likely to comply with court orders, knowing they could appeal to a different judge. This would undermine the judiciary's authority and weaken the rule of law. Section 6. Civil versus criminal contempt, different tools for different offences. Contempt of court can be either civil or criminal in nature. Understanding the distinction between these two types of contempt is crucial. Civil contempt is used to enforce compliance with a court order for the benefit of another party involved in a case. Criminal contempt, on the other hand, punishes conduct that disrespects the court or obstructs the administration of justice. In civil contempt cases, the court may impose fines or imprisonment until the party in contempt complies with the court order. The goal is not to punish the individual, but to coerce them into obedience. Criminal contempt, however, carries more serious penalties, including fines, imprisonment, or both. The distinction between civil and criminal contempt is important because it affects the rights of the accused. In criminal contempt cases, the accused has the right to due process protections such as the right to an attorney and the right to remain silent. These protections are not always available in civil contempt cases. Section 7. Legal mechanisms at play navigating the labyrinth of contempt. Contempt proceedings can be complex and involve a variety of legal mechanisms. When a party is accused of contempt, they have the right to challenge the accusation in court. The court will hold a hearing to determine whether the party is in contempt and, if so, what sanctions are appropriate. In some cases, the party accused of contempt may appeal the judge's ruling to a higher court. However, as previously discussed, the principle of judicial independence limits the ability of higher courts to overturn contempt rulings. This principle is rooted in the need to maintain the integrity of the judicial process. It's also important to note the role of the executive branch in contempt cases. The executive branch, through the Department of Justice, is responsible for enforcing court orders. This can sometimes put the executive branch at odds with the judiciary, particularly when the executive disagrees with a particular court order. Section 8. The stakes are high judicial authority and the balance of power. The principle that a judge's contempt ruling cannot be reversed by another judge is not just a matter of legal technicality. It goes to the heart of the American system of government. This principle protects the judiciary's independence and ensures the balance of power among the branches of government. When the executive branch ignores or defies court orders, it undermines the rule of law and threatens the very foundations of democracy. The judiciary's ability to enforce its rulings through contempt power is essential to prevent tyranny and protect individual rights. The cases involving the Trump administration's deportation policies and the treatment of Kilmar Abrego Garcia serve as stark reminders of the importance of judicial independence. These cases highlight the potential for abuse of power when one branch of government attempts to operate above the law. The principle of judicial independence is not a guarantee of absolute power for judges. Like all branches of government, the judiciary is subject to checks and balances. However, this principle is essential to ensure that the judiciary can fulfill its critical role as a guardian of the Constitution and a protector of individual rights.